My journey moving from being a registered mental health nurse working on a busy acute ward to being a chief clinical information officer working for a large software company that delivers solutions into the health market was not one step. It wasn't one leap going from being a nurse on a ward to being a chief clinical information officer. There were many, many steps I had to take. And some of those steps took place way before I became a nurse. I had a prior qualification as a mechatronic engineer and computer-aided engineer. So I always had a passion of working systemically, working with systems from design, testing, implementation, all those things. I had that before I entered the arena of mental health nursing. But when I qualified as a mental health nurse, I think in 2003, medical records were becoming digitized. So that meant moving away from paper to electronic systems. And that was led up by the National Program for IT. So I had to really make the case, because I found this as an opportunity. I found nurses struggling on the wards to make use of the technology that they had. And they always wanted to keep going back, and they were saying things such as paper is so much better, because that's what they were used to. So I was up for the challenge because I could see the real value in working in that way. So I struggled to articulate my desire to work alongside the informatics IMT department in the deployment of the technology. So my manager couldn't then see the value that it had to frontline nursing. But as years progressed and the various roles I took up, using my own initiative, I was a floor walker, I was a digital rep for the software that we're using. So every time they had new iterations, new pieces of software, they would ask me to floor walk, support the nurses in that process. And many of those activities I'd done on my own time. So I still had to do my full-time job at the same time, work extra hours with the IMT department. And sometimes I did some volunteer work as well, just so that I got my foot in the door. In order for you to work within the informatics environment, there are additional qualifications you need to be aware of. And one of them was, first and foremost, was the Prince 2. Being able to work within a project environment is one that is crucial and one that I needed to have training on. The key responsibility of my role as a Chief Clinical Information Officer working for a software company is first and foremost to ensure that the solution fits the needs for the clinicians, that is clinically safe. So we're developing solutions that are not only enabling the nurse to do a particular function within the health space, but also that it keeps the patient safe. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to do away with paper. And in doing away with paper, you've got to have a process that's safer than the process that predated it. So it means a lot of software testing, a lot of working out different methodologies and ensuring that a system uses, say, natural design. So for instance, if you know clinicians work in a particular way, that your software doesn't disable the clinician to work in the way that they're accustomed to, and where there's deviation or variance, that the clinicians are supported in making that transition. So I'll say first and foremost, it's all about clinical safety. Safety is at the heart of what I do as a Chief Clinical Information Officer. It's engagement as well, making sure that the nurses have a voice, nurses, patients as well, if it's patient-facing modules, and also that we're developing things that add real value. What I bring to the informatics arena is not only my clinical registration through the NMC, my code of conduct, the way that I was trained for 3 years to be a clinician. That's one thing you bring, that methodology, that training, that vast level of experience that you have in the way that you treat a patient in terms of when you first assess, you plan, you implement, you review, all of that, the nursing processes that we take for granted when we have in a nurse-to-nurse conversation. When we work in the digital environment, those are things that do not come naturally to the developers, to a software company. So you bring that sense of professionalism to them. So they're not just coding anymore. You know, the coding impacts the ability, or impacts the safety and the outcomes of clinical care. So it goes beyond just being code. You're actually bringing something of real value to the table. So that professionalism that comes from membership with the RCN, membership with the NMC, that you have to keep yourself up to date, continuously learning and adapting, is something that I bring to the table. I enjoy the challenge. You know, it is very difficult. It's not to say walking both paths, you walk equally. You know, the deficits all the time. When you try to marry clinical activities with digital processes, you have to constantly keep your skills up to date. And as you learn one thing, you might find there's a deficit in the other. So it's constantly going back and forth, double checking, is your recommendation correct in terms of, say, for example, electronic prescribing? Are you up to date in medication administration? So you can see how the two go hand in hand. So understanding how a system might be processing, say, electronic prescribing, then actually you remembering and keeping up to date everything that's required to actually administer the medication, you know, is one whereby you're going to be faced that challenge all the time. And you could do that for every aspect of informatics, from the care planning to risk assessments to ward layout. Anything you do in that arena has the actual clinical application to it.